Ridgewood Winery home became part of the Underground Railroad. How many slaves came through on their way to freedom? So I do knock on the building, let the spirits know who I am and why I'm there. I could feel someone watching me. This spirit was so excited to tell her story. Floating in the picture is a man's head to his upper chest.
No, that's not a good story. Don't do that one.
The lights, the flashlights are just going wild. The cat ball is going wild. Well, he had an accident with a knife on his throat.
Sounds like a horror movie.
She knows all the house's secrets. Why do we have ghosts?
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Medium's Table. I'm your host, Michelle Gardner. This podcast is your personal invitation to join me at the intersection of the everyday and the extraordinary. Together, we'll explore the magic of mediumship, share spiritual stories, and connect with fellow mediums on this incredible journey. So grab a seat, pour yourself a cuppa, and come join us at the Medium's Table, where spirits gather and stories unfold. I'd like to welcome back to the show Julie. Now, Julie is let me just see if I can get this list right, a ghost hunter, a reiki master, or a paranormal investigator, should I say, a medium, a tarot reader. Have I left anything else out?
I don't think so. I do all this.
But I'm sure anything else will come out in the many episodes that we've got planned for you. Now, Julie, this is your second interview. And if anyone wants to watch your first one, which is a great introduction to who you are and what you do and your journey and life story, which was phenomenal, they can go back to episode 18 and you'll find it there. I'll also put it in the show notes for people to go back and watch or listen. But it's great to have you back again. And I know you've got so many exciting stories, unusual, unique, I don't know what to call them, chill factor, all those ones that you just sit there on the edge of your seat going, oh, tell me more. So what do you have for us today?
Well, thank you for having me back.
You're welcome.
Exciting to be here. I wanted to talk about an investigation that we did at the Ridgewood Winery, which is not far from my house, actually, in Pennsylvania. It was an old farm, right? It was built in the 1700s, probably before we have any records. I don't believe they have the year on it. And it was, at that time, it's kind of a typical colonial cabin sort of looking place, but it's stone and it's 2 stories. And that part of the building now is the tasting room for the winery. So you can go in there. There's a big fireplace, the big colonial fireplaces like you can stand up in, and then there's an attic there's a second story and an attic above it. So that is not typical for, I think, that size building for that era. I'm not sure. But it's the stone is like all irregular shapes because it just comes out of the ground and they even it out, but it's not like you see like bricks, and then I think it was 1811, they built an addition onto the house, which is massive compared. So it is also 3 stories, but it's probably a whole nother story above the initial part of the building. And the 2 buildings do join inside. So you don't know when you're inside that you're in the old part or the new part, because really it wasn't even probably 100 years later that they built the addition. It's currently owned by a couple who've turned it into a winery and event place. They have events there. They have in the barn, they have a place to have like catering and stuff. In the front of the building, because back in those days, they didn't do like cooking in the house in the summer. So there is a summer kitchen, which is also a little stone building. Um, and there are some other little stone buildings, which I'm not sure exactly what they were all used for. The property is really unique in that the owners have records that were kept by the former slaves.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And they were records that were kept that the slave owners did not know were being kept.
Oh,
Yeah, it's fascinating. So current day, of course, it's a winery. In between, it was many different things. But early in its, building, it's always been a prominent property. And back in colonial days, they were very active in the revolution. Um, and ongoingly, it always seemed to house some people with prominence or politics. There are documentations of some of our founding fathers visiting that property, you know, in early years. So Reading is north of Philadelphia. And during the Revolutionary War, the area housed mostly the Hessians, who were kind of the hired mercenaries, when they were captured. So it was Reading already had a German population, and then they added all these Hessian outlaws kind of thing. Just to give you an idea, like, I don't know how long it took them to get here, though. I know it takes me, like an hour doing it, an hour and a half in a car. I don't know how long it would take them to get, to march up here. Um,
yeah.
so I went to the investigation. It's actually an event they hold at the winery. They have a bunch of like different things, like just to have socialization and wine tasting and some snacks,
Mm.
So maybe there were 20 people who bought a ticket to come and investigate. It was supposed to be 2 hours. I think it was probably three, because we were having so much fun. I got there around 4, and I went with my partner, who is a psychic artist. He draws spirits that he sees. And we just knew the address. We generally go not knowing anything about the property, and just the address. So we pulled in an hour before so that we can kind of go through and do our thing without tripping over people and find out anything we need to find out. So I got out of the car and I just started walking up to the building. Um, and I could feel someone watching me from the middle of the building, like the second story, which is the newer, was built in the early 1800s area. And she felt to me like very, she owned the house, and
Yeah.
she wasn't sure she wanted visitors. Like, she liked having visitors, but she wanted to be in charge of who came, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so she felt kind of cautious, maybe like, I'm not sure I want these people here. And then I was attracted to the summer kitchen before I got to the door, and I just went, and you can look right in. It's just like a one little room with a hardwood floor, and they do some events in there, like maybe like the size of like a bridal shower or baby shower, like a couple, a handful of people, not like 500 people. And I felt nauseous. I just immediately felt nauseous, and violence and fear. And this African American lady was just there, and she was not letting anyone into that building. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And she's
Yeah.
in spirit.
In spirit. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Um, so, I walked up to the door, and the walls of these buildings are very thick because the stone is just, thick. It's huge. So the doorway is like a foot or maybe even 18 inches wide. So I do knock on the building. I have learned that, and I feel like that is very helpful. I know that it's not shown in a lot of shows that people watch, but I always knock on the building and let the spirits know who I am and why I'm there, and that I'm not going to do them any harm, and just to communicate. So I go inside, and there is Tracy, the owner, and one of the people who works with her. And it's just a little space. They've got not a lot of furniture or anything. It's just, that's where they do their wine tasting. So there's kind of a bar. And I just told her, I was like, there's this African American lady out here, and she wouldn't let me near the building, but I felt really nauseous, like there's been violence there. And she's like, oh. And so we started talking about Mammy. So Tracy started asking me questions. I told her also about the woman I saw upstairs. And she started asking me questions. And I said, well, they are both here. They don't interact with each other so much. Um, she told me, she said, you met Mammy, like that's what they call her, or she calls herself. And then Sarah would be the other woman, probably, who is upstairs, and that we connect with her also. So this spirit was so excited to tell her story. So we started talking about why I would feel nauseous. And Mammy was the female protector of the house. She ran the house, right? She made sure everyone had what they needed as far as preparing food and all those things. She would protect the girls who were being pursued by people they didn't want attention from. They,
Oh,
they would
yeah.
run into that building, and she would not let them in if she could, right?
Mm.
And then, Tracy went on to tell me, like, most of this is documented. So um in that time that I was just in that room, things were just going crazy. Like, it was as if I was just talking to Mammy and telling Tracy what was happening. And it unfolded just the spirit in the house of, like, feminine wounding and suffering, but also strength and survival and even thriving.
Mm.
So she was a freed slave. And the home became part of the Underground Railroad.
Right.
And so she and her male counterpart kept the records about who came through there and how many slaves came through on their way to freedom, and who did the deals and what the deals were. Right now, they weren't supposed to know this information. The owners of the business, the building, didn't weren't aware that she was literate. She actually spoke.
Ah,
She actually
yeah.
spoke 3 or 4 languages. She spoke English. I believe she spoke French, and she spoke maybe Creole, but also a slave language, a way to communicate to other slaves. Now, some of that was written symbols, but these are all things that she told me, right? And kind of filled in blanks of what Tracy knew, and how she was able to. She knows all the house's secrets.
Wow.
Mhm. So during that time, we were all, of course, excited to be there. And the group that I work with is called Casper with a K, um, because they come out of Kutztown. And so they were using their equipment. And I went off with a teammate and towards some of the building. I didn't get through the entire building at all. Um, we went upstairs, and that's where I had seen the woman on my way in. Um, and that room was actually kind of like a very large closet, right?
Mm, mm.
I don't know what it was back in the day. It's at the top of the stairs, and they use it for like their linens and hospitality supplies when they have events. Um, so my teammate Kristen was asking so we went to open the door. Now the colonial doors are just like they're like levers, it's like a big, they're almost always painted black. I guess they're iron, and it's like a big square on the door frame, and then it's just a lever that opens. And she went to open it, and it wouldn't let her open the door.
Ooh.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 times she couldn't open the door. And she had even said, "Let me see if it lets me open." She has been there several times and is well acquainted with the building. And it wouldn't let her open. She looks at me, and I just reached and tapped it, and door swung open. Right. Okay. All right. So we go in. I'm getting chills not talking about it. So we go in and close the door, and I'm like, "Oh, somebody doesn't want you in here." um, like the woman was stomping her feet, right? And Kristen was not she wasn't instigating, but she was like, "I bet she doesn't, because I know what she did." And I felt this, you know, pain on not pain on my throat, but a block on my throat. And I told her, like, I'm holding my throat. And as I was talking about the woman and what she was saying, I was describing her, and I said, she's not um she's not a negative spirit, but she's in charge here, and she manages here, and she is a good businesswoman, and she will, and I put my finger across my throat, like, like she's gonna get the better end of the deal. Not that,
Mm.
I mean, you should expect that, right? Like, not that she's going to do you dirty, but that she's not going to take any BS or whatever. Kristen's
Yeah.
her eyes got really big. So apparently, in that space is where her husband met with a very, well, he had an accident with a knife on his throat. Um,
Oh, an
and
accident.
and the obituary says it was a shaving accident, but his throat was slit. Yes. So, and we'll continue that story at a later date.
Oh,
So
wow.
from there, we went into what is the second story of the original building, and that's an office space where they do, office things. So there's computers, and there's, people's belongings. And I don't think anyone at the winery spends a lot of time there, which is good because it's a very disorienting place. Like, the energy there kind of feels like confusing. I felt a little confused. It feels like you're on a ship, like the floor
Mm,
moves sort of. You might feel a little woozy. And I haven't yet I don't yet understand or know exactly what's going on with that space. From there, there is another attic that doesn't connect to the additional building. So my partner, Matt, came in and he had been encouraged to go up into the attic. So he started to go up there and he took a couple steps. He said, "They won't let me up." And I said, "What do you mean they won't let you up?" He said, "They won't let me up." So I went and I knocked on the door and I said, who I was and could Matt and I come up? And then we did. We went up. And there were two children up there. Um, Matt starts drawing. Uh, I felt like, so the children are hiding and there's someone with them. She's keeping them quiet, you know? And it's hard to interpret what exactly you're feeling because, of course, if she's keeping them quiet, there's a reason she's keeping them quiet, you know?
Mm.
So there was a sense of fear, which I didn't really delve all, I didn't get all that. And then I suddenly felt like, and I believe it was my left leg, like I didn't have any leg from my knee down.
Oh, right.
Right. Um, and one of the things they hear up there is a dragging sound across the.
Oh.
So I'm not sure. I mean, that could be a whole nother hunt on its own.
Mm.
So later in the evening, the children show up in the hallway and they're beckoning me with their finger, like the little boy is like, "Come here." And I did not get over there. I still haven't gotten over there. So we'll see sometime what he has to tell us, but there are secrets there as well.
Sounds like a horror movie.
I'm not really crazy about ghost children, to be honest.
Yeah. It's just like, are they playing or are they playing?
Yeah. And is someone pretending? I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, by that time, it was time to, get started. People had come in. There were, I'm going to just say like 20 people. And we had myself and Kristen as two female investigators. And I believe there were three male investigators. And we gathered in the back parlor. The building has a front parlor, which is where the deals were done. And that's where the men would gather. Should be no women in there. There were separate servants for that area, but big things went down in that area, right? And then in the back parlor is where the women and the children would have been served, where they would have eaten, or where they would have hung out, whatever. So we gathered in that back parlor. There's also a big fireplace. And we just introduced ourselves. They went over some of the equipment, and I went last as far as introducing myself because I was kind of wandering around misdirected. And so as I started to speak, my throat closed. Like literally, they were not going to let me tell the story. Right. I mean, it's closed to the point where I'm like coughing and I couldn't speak. Not, I had been fine and now I couldn't speak.
Wow.
So we didn't really, so we split up into two groups and Kristen and I went to the front parlor and just sat in the chairs next to the fireplace. There's like a china cabinet and there were several tables set up. And we started talking about the guests chose equipment. They had a ton of equipment, like, so they chose equipment and we talked about how to use it. We set the flashlights up so they could flash. And I like to start an investigation like lower tech, because I feel like once you get to the high tech things, it's easier for them maybe, and there's less, like, spirits have less effort, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so it's really exciting to hear, voices over a stereo, like a speaker. That's very exciting. And oh my God. However, it's really cool when you knock and they finish the song. You know what I mean? Like when you knock, like on the wall and say, "Can you finish this?" And I usually do like shave and a haircut, and they do 2 bits, right? Or
Wow.
that is just, yeah, or you show them something new or something. So we were talking about we just started talking about the room and what went on in that room. And Kristen, of course, knew some of the things that have other guests have experienced. That is the room where the men would do their business dealings. Um, and women shouldn't be in there. So sometimes women feel a little uncomfortable, maybe. Um, and in that room, dark skinned people will be touched. And as we were sitting there, I believe it was as we were sitting there, two guests arrived who didn't buy a ticket, didn't plan to be there, right? And they came from about an hour away, had never been there before, and didn't know this was going on. But one of them is African American,
Mm.
and he was touched, and it was their way of saying, like, "You're safe here, like it's okay to be here," because
Yeah.
the house was supportive of the Underground Railroad. So we spoke about that and about the Underground Railroad. And as we're doing this, the lights start flashing. The overhead lights, like the chandelier, would flash a little bit. And it's so subtle sometimes you're like, wait, did that happen? you know, did I
Yeah.
just experience that? And as people have fun, start to laugh, the spirits love that. Again, when you watch television shows, it's all about the fear, and that's true. And there are things out there that want you to feel afraid. But when you're celebrating their life and telling their story and the energy rises, all kinds of things start happening. So lots of conversations are going on. It looks like and feels like a cocktail party, right? Which is kind of what happened in that room, except it wouldn't have been mixed genders.
Yeah.
And Tracy, the owner, comes to the door. She was floating back and forth, and serving and answering questions and interjecting. And I still hadn't really shared with any of the guests my experiences with upon entering the building. And suddenly I I was sitting by the fireplace, and my head just kept turning towards this man in the corner who was seated near the doorway. He had dark black hair and a full beard and light eyes. And I just kept looking at him. And Tracy was in the doorway. And I'd look at Tracy and I'd look back at him. And I'd try to, go back to the conversation. And I just couldn't. And people were talking, and kind of, rudely, I just stopped what was happening. And I said to Tracy, I don't know why, but I need to point out that this man looks familiar. And I'm getting chills again. And she's like, she looks at him, and she looks at me, and I said, I really don't know anything else. I just keep having my head turned back to him. He was there with his fiance, I believe, and dressed like a normal person, nothing unusual. And she said, well, do you hear anything else? Do you feel anything else? And I said, I hear the words lost son.
Oh, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. and that was it. Like, I have goosebumps too. Right. So she disappears off to her space, and we're doing what we were doing, and she comes back with a piece of paper, that was printed off the computer. And she said that she had this picture was given to her by the local Birdsboro Historical Society. So they had it from, I don't know when or where. And it's a picture of the barn of the property. And kind of floating in the picture is a man's like head to his upper chest. Kind of not quite in profile, but a little bit of in profile. And doesn't it just look like this man?
Oh, no way.
Yes. But that picture is of an apparition. The man is not there. Yeah.
Wow.
That's one of the early pictures that
Oh, just goosebumps.
like crazy. It's crazy. And that was just crazy. So we went on to talk about how he does look like he's from the Civil War era. He used to be a reenactor when he was a kid. He and his family would go to Gettysburg and places like that and reenact. So he would dress up like a little soldier. And it was just so interesting how spirit uses what's in the room,
Yeah.
Maybe it was someone who had passed, who he did the camping with or the reenactment with. I want to say it was his father, but now I'm wondering if it was his mom. When these things happen to me, I don't always remember everything. Like, I was there, but but Julie doesn't really remember because I wasn't trying to do a reading, but he got the acknowledgement, and the words that came through. When we do evidential mediumship, of course, we're focused on one energy and one spirit, and that's the message for the person in front of us. And I feel like in this situation, it was bigger, right? So the house was trying to tell me about this lost son, maybe, which drew in Tracy and her picture, right?
Yeah.
And then also gave him a message and a memory of his reenacting and an acknowledgement of his own service. I believe he was had served.
Oh.
And kind of, it was like, and then everyone witnessing it live, because you can't make that stuff up, right? You just if anyone there doubted spirit right there, it's like, I'm not that you can't make that happen. You just can't, and as a medium, you have to just kind of go with what's happening, even though, you know, it was socially awkward. I just interrupted the whole thing. I'm like, listen, I have to say this, right? And, Tracy runs off and comes back with a picture, not even a picture of a person, a picture of an apparition.
Yeah.
It looks like the person in the room who used to be a Civil War reenactor. Huh.
Yeah, go figure.
and it was really funny because it did get us talking about how ghost hunting is very much and can be very much about history, and telling the stories of these spirits that, in this case, especially with Mammy, who I spoke about earlier, I feel like that's one of the reasons she's around, is that she has a story that needs to be told.
Yeah.
And people need to remember the Underground Railroad, and people need to remember the violence, and that women were property,
Mm,
and that humans were property. And could we not go back there? you know,
yeah.
you know, and the memories that building holds are huge,
Mm,
and as we're living them, right? Like, we're all living a life and we're all going day to day doing this and that. We're not really thinking about that. But 200 years from now, what is my house going to tell somebody? Oh, please don't tell them. No, don't tell them that. Can I edit it?
Yeah, not that secret. No, not that one either. No, that's not a good story. Don't do that one.
At all how it happened.
Exactly. Oh, now you're exaggerating.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
So about that time, we switched with the other group, and we had decided that Kristen and I would stay. Oh, we would go upstairs with our group. Actually, that's what was going to happen. We were switching locations, and the other group came downstairs. So we started upstairs, and at the top of the landing, we gathered. Um, and that is the site of where the man passed. He was found on the landing, and asked the men in the room how they felt there. And to a man, all of them were like, "I feel uncomfortable." Like, yeah, well, that's why. There was some, retribution, maybe,
Mm,
against it in that space. That's when I saw the children at the doorway, beckoning. So also that door, of course, is kept closed because it's a staff only space. It's not public access. There are some rooms in the home that have to be, not public access. They have business to do, you know. Um, so the door opens sometimes by itself. And again, it's that lever lock, like that just shouldn't happen,
yeah.
right? So, um, uh, speaking with them helps. It does help, like to say, okay, well, we see you're opening the door, but Tracy really needs this door to be closed, and then it lets it stay closed. Like, it's interesting how the spirits know what we're doing there
Yeah.
and who's in charge there now, you know. So we went into the I don't know what they call that room, but it would be the room above the women and children's parlor. I guess it was a bedroom. It's large, Um, and we were just kind of regrouping. Everybody had had some snacks and telling some stories. We started talking about Mammy, and the lights started flickering and going on and off. And then we just kept getting interrupted. Um, just strange, strange things. And Tracy had come up, and they weren't getting a lot of activity downstairs. So we decided to switch staff. And we went down to the front room again, and we're just telling them kind of the things that I've told you. We then all gathered where we had started out the night in the back parlor, and talked about our evidence, the things that have happened, what they saw upstairs, what happened. And I started talking about Mammy and what she had told me. and about the languages she spoke. And then the African American gentleman spoke up and told us that that was Creole and confirmed that they had their own language, right? The
Mm.
slaves on the Underground Railroad, because of course they came from many different places, and they came from, I mean, not just many different places in our country, many different places around the world. So they may not have spoken the same language. So
Yeah,
they had
yeah.
to develop their own. They also had to be able to communicate in ways that, maybe weren't verbal. So one thing that they did was the cornrows. You know what cornrows are,
In
right? The
in the hair.
braids.
Yep.
So they would braid their a map in the hair. Yeah,
Ah,
isn't that fascinating? Mhm.
wow.
And
Clever.
yes, and there were symbols and things to look for on their journey, because sometimes they were by themselves. It wasn't like, someone came and picked them up in a van and drove them, and, they would get separated. And if they were caught, they could be killed. They would be returned, um, you know, and they
Mm.
would be made, it would be very public, probably, punishment. So it wasn't something they undertook lightly. So Mammy also talked to me about her dress. And she told me that she had two dresses that she was very proud of, and she had made them herself. She did not make all the clothing for everybody, but she was so proud, being a free woman, to have earned enough money to buy her own fabric and wear a fancy colored fabric, a print.
Mm.
Um, and she would save that mostly for, when she went to church or special occasions. Um, and she told me in that, when she was talking about some of the things that she did, she told me that she did not sew for the family. That was not part of what she did. She managed the family. She made sure that the visitors, the people who lived there, the slaves passing through on the Underground Railroad, that everybody's needs were met, that everybody was fed, that they had what they needed as they moved through the location. She kept track of them. Um, they have that journal that I spoke about of resources.
Mm.
And um, she also altered women's clothing, so to help disguise and hide things that weren't meant to be come to fruition. So
Yeah.
there were many, unfortunately, occasions where she attended to, in a midwife sort of way, um, the termination of a pregnancy, um,
Mm.
and the concealment of a pregnancy. And she shared that through mediumship.
Wow.
And as I'm telling the story in the back room, with, all of us were in that room at the time. So there were 20 or so guests and 5 or so staff. Um, the flashlights are just going wild. The cat ball is going wild. And just verifying all the words, that are coming out, you know, again, we go back to evidential mediumship, which is very specific about getting the evidence of this person who's in for the message. And when you're doing a ghost hunt, well, I mean, there is evidence, of course, because she told me things that only Tracy knew, right? And Tracy knew
Mm.
them because they were in a journal, that Tracy had read. Um, but flickering the lights for us. And we even had cat balls again across the room and said, now do this one, and they did it. She did it. And it felt like such a celebration and a relief to say those things and to acknowledge to her that the life she lived and the work that she did led to the freedoms we enjoy today.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want those things to be forgotten.
Mm.
It's very important, that house, democracy is very important to that house, and freedoms, the freedom of the slaves that went through there, the freedom of the women who lived there and had varying degrees of, freedom and education, and then not having those things.
Yeah.
As um, it's all held in that house.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
those are regular people. They're regular
Yeah.
people who live there.
That's
Yes,
incredible.
it is. It's really fascinating how alive they feel,
Yeah.
and how relieved I feel like they are having their story told. So now
Mm.
we had some facts. Of course, Tracy had access to facts, but to paint a picture of what her life was like and how she took it on herself to protect, and how she honored those who didn't survive, you know, um, and took care of and cleaned up, so that in a way that life was honored.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really very, just gives you a really deep understanding of what they dealt with, and the consequences of, oh my god, being an unwed mother in those days. What the heck, like,
Yeah. Harsh.
the death sentence right there.
Mm.
um so about that time, we kind of wrapped up and planned another hunt, and they're short little hunts. I mean, I've done hunts that are, hours, 8 hours. But the jam-packed experience and entertainment and multiple levels of just things going on, having, um, you know, personal experiences for the guests, having the guests learn about equipment, learn about themselves,
Mm.
uncover some of their own gifts, and many of them come in as skeptics, which I love, because as I tell these stories, I have to tell you that, I wake up every day and I'm a skeptic. I know
Yeah.
what happened. I know what I've experienced. And I'm like, okay, show me, because I want to know today. I want a miracle today.
Yeah.
Um, So deliver it.
Make it happen.
Yeah. And you can see exactly how entertaining they can be, and
Yeah.
enjoy it. So throughout that hunt, that experience, there was still, this issue of this other woman spirit existing. And uh, she did let me speak after I was speaking about somebody else, right? I was speaking about,
Oh.
so she didn't interfere during that part, but that definitely was not wanting us to explore that. So stay tuned.
Wow. Yeah. So can I ask about the underground railway?
Sure.
So that still exists today, or has that been covered over or filled in?
In that building, I believe it was the basement probably and the barn that
Right.
they would hide people. Um, I don't believe there were tunnels. Some places had like tunnels, but mostly the Underground Railroad was really, kind of loosely arranged, but very respected
Mm,
um, path of, locations that were accepting of slaves on the run that would help
right.
you, you know. So sometimes they did come in groups, sometimes they were individuals. Um, and they communicated how to arrive, when to, that kind of thing. I mean,
Mm,
I don't know all of that history. But there are several locations nearby that were part of the Underground Railroad. Um, I don't believe she didn't mention if there are any parts of the house that are particularly um, built for that. Some houses had like a fake wall, that kind of thing. Maybe because it's farther out of the South, it wasn't felt like it was necessary,
yeah.
you know. In Pennsylvania still, I believe if you were caught as a runaway slave, they had to return you. I believe that was the law. Um, but and I do know that, Maryland was part of, we have a border with Maryland, and it was Confederate, and that there were hunters who would come across the border from Maryland and try to capture slaves and take them back. So it was part of that kind of contentious space.
Yeah.
But I know that none of them, they didn't, believe they were free until they were well into Canada. you know
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that was where they were mostly heading.
Yeah. Right. Wow. That's incredible. There's so much history in one spot.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
just that's just amazing. And, for the addition to be built in what you said, 1811, and that's, oh, wow. And for the house to still be standing and usable,
Mhm, mhm.
that's even more amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Gosh, that's been obviously well preserved piece of history for that area.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is part of the National Historic Landmarks. Well,
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
that they be preserved. So the registry, National Historic Registry. So properties on the registry have to, like, there are rules you have to follow. You can't add certain things, you know, because you
Mm,
can't recognize them, having that distinction.
yeah.
Right. But
Wow. Now, and you did another hunt there, which you'll talk about on the next episode. Is that correct?
yes, yes, I went back there.
Ooh, I can't wait for that one.
And
Well,
it's close enough that I drive by and I'll be like, "Hey guys."
and now they're accustomed to you. They're like, oh, there's Julie. We can't wait for her to come back.
Whose
and
turn is it again?
yeah, tell more stories about
It's
us.
just it's fascinating, the unfolding, because you just don't I didn't, and I grew up in a crazy haunted house, but I just didn't think about it that way. You
Yeah.
know, the layers of stories and how some of them don't interact at all. They could be 100 years apart, right?
Yeah. It's really as you get older, it's you get a whole new perspective of ghosts or spirits, like because you talk about, children are scared of ghosts, when they're little. And then as you grow up now, it's sort of their spirits and they're a bit more respected and thought about differently. And, I guess over time you get more educated, don't you? And with your experience, especially with the amount of experience you've had, it goes to, like you're now able to put that wisdom to good use now and use it to honor them.
Yeah. And I feel like that was something I discovered, and I didn't expect to find that when I started ghost hunting. Well, I didn't really want to start ghost hunting, let's be honest. But I mean, the first place I went with the organization, when I was hired, was a prison, and it was not pleasant, right? So discovering the history connection, well, and of course you should keep that history alive as well, because we don't want those kinds of prisons to exist either. But the history part and the telling of the stories and the way it seems to alleviate their suffering, there's always that question about why do we have ghosts, and many mediums and all of the teachers that I've had, they don't talk about ghosts, and we don't have ghosts. And I can understand receiving a reading. You don't want your loved one to be stuck.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that these spirits were stuck,
Yeah.
I don't know what to actually make of that. But
Yeah.
I feel like it, and I don't know if it's a choice, but I feel like telling their story released some pressure for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whether they linger there or not, or they keep telling their story, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's one of the mysteries. I think I started learning divination to kind of alleviate anxiety, right? Because you have the sense something's going to happen, and if I could have some guidance, whatever. And now I feel like the more I know, the more questions I have.
It's like opening Pandora's box, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe you don't want to pull on that thread. Oh, let's just give it a tug. Let's just see what's in there.
Exactly.
Can't be that strange. Well,
or can it?
Stay tuned.
Exactly. Oh, thank you so much, Julie, for joining us again. And it's been such a pleasure, and I love your stories. There's so much depth to. Oh, geez, I can't even get my words out. Depth to them, and so much wisdom as well. And you've got a great way of showing the other side, of representing the spirit, and I love that, because not everything needs to be a horror movie, and that was a beautiful story. It really was.
Thank you. One of my teachers, actually, James Van Praagh, speaks about how the medium really works for spirit. Person in front of you may be the one who made the appointment, and they might be the one, giving you money or, but really you're working for spirit. It's kind of different.
That's so true. So true. Now, where can people find you, Julie?
Oh, I'm all over the internet these days. Oh,
thank God. Because we really need to find you. Thank God.
Well, and that's why I'm the mediumatlarge.com with some hyphens, because and on Facebook, Medium at Large.
Fantastic. And you're on Instagram as well, is that true?
I am.
Fantastic. And I'll put all of those links in the show notes as well. And your previous episode. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode for part 2 that follows this current story being part 1. Thank you again, Julie. It's been a pleasure having you. Thanks for joining me at the Medium's Table. The universe is always speaking. Listen and let your spirit soar. Curious for more? Click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe.